So I myself am a pretty big fan of spell-based poison builds. And we don't have too many options when it comes to spells to use in those builds. And since Blade Vortex got hit with a nerf, I decided to take a look at Bladefall Blade Blast. And initially, I wasn't a fan. The 2-button playstyle of Bladefall Blade Blast really just doesn't do it for me all that much. I don't enjoy how clunky it feels. But with the introduction of Spellslinger, it really takes away all the clunkiness from the playstyle. Instead of having to stand still and to cast 2 abilities, you pretty much just auto-attack once. And this turned out to be a pretty decent poison build. Now, since we're an assassin with a bunch of elusive effect, we are somewhat zoomy when it comes to mapping, and we are able to clear tier 16 maps with ease. But the mapping isn't really anything to phone home about. It doesn't have intense clear speed, it is poison based, so you could just use Plaguebearer to carry you through clearing any tier map pretty much. But the real strength of this build lies in how good it kills bosses, even when you're not good at killing bosses. Now in this setup we have Bladefall, Blade Blast, and even our auto attacks, all applying poison stacks. So it's really easy for us to apply a few hundred poison stacks to an enemy really quickly. Now, with the Assassin Ascendancy Noxious Strikes, we gain increased poison duration per poison we've applied recently. So this means that our poison DPS ramps up extremely fast and extremely well against longer boss fights. Pretty much any boss in Path of Exile, you just have to fight for the first 50% of their HP bar, and then you can just die and watch them die as well. Like, this is the beauty of this sort of build, and this is why it's a really good build to play early on into a new league, where gear is a little bit scarce, or you're facing new content, new bosses that you've never fought before. Because like I said, you only have to fight for the first half of the boss fight, and then the poison stacks pretty much just do the rest. Now, a build like this has a lot of flexibility when it comes to gear. You could push for hundreds of millions of DPS, you could go for a more survivable build, but then have minimal DPS, you could go for a zoomy mapper, you could go for something focused purely on farming bosses. So you don't really have too many forced options when it comes to gearing. Now, the gear that I've decided to choose in this build was pretty much based off of 2 things. One, Badge of the Brotherhood is cheap. It's not based in slot, it's not great for this sort of build. I just wanted to use a badge again, because they're less than an Exalted Orb in the current league. And then 2, this is Ultimatum League, and I wanted a build that could reliably do ultimatums. There's nothing worse than dying in wave 9 or wave 10 of an ultimatum and losing all of your gear. So this build is focused a lot around sustained fights in ultimatum and being able to complete ultimatums, and I have to say it did turn out to be a really good ultimatum farmer. Now, although we only have around 5,000 effective HP in this specific setup, it still performs really well in ultimatums, thanks to the fact that we are attacked, dodge capped at 75%, and we're close to spell dodge cap as well. I think currently I'm sitting at 72% chance to dodge spell hits, and we also incorporate Wind Dancer. But the real strength here comes in from the fact that we have life gained on hit and energy shield gained on hit from our spells. Now this means that every single blade that falls and every single Blade Blast explosion that hits an enemy gives us a little bit of life and a little bit of ES. Now this might not sound that impactful, but in ultimatum encounters where you have so many monsters grouped into a tiny little area, this pretty much makes us unkillable, except if you take a very big hit. But if you keep moving, that doesn't happen all that often. Hey guys, Sniz here, and in this video we're gonna go over the Poison Bladefall Blade Blast Spellslinger Assassin. Oh, that just sounds stupid. That I've been playing in Ultimatum. Now, like I said, gear is pretty flexible, so this is gonna be less of a you need these specific items sort of guide, and more of a guide to Poison Bladefall Blade Blast in general, where we talk about the items that I chose, why I chose them, and then also discuss a few alternative options. So, let's get into it. Time for the obligatory self-plug. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, or any of the other videos on my channel, and you want to see more like them, you can always consider subscribing so you don't miss any new videos I upload. And if you want to hang out while I do live streams, you can always follow the stream over on Twitch. Link to that down in the description below. Okay, let's talk about the build. For real this time. Okay, so let's first talk about the gameplay, how the build actually plays. So, like I said, this is a Spellslinger build. We auto-attack and we get Bladefall Blade Blast cast in sequence thanks to Spellslinger. We have our Bladefall in a Poet's Pen that allows us to cast Bladefall without having to reserve it as a Spellslinger aura. And then we have Blade Blast in our main 6-link. And I also want to point out here that none of my gems are awakened at all. So all the background footage that you've seen is just on normal gems, only level 20, some of them are 20 quality. So the idea is just you run up to monsters, you auto-attack them, and then your Blade Falls and Blade Blasts just completely obliterate the enemies. Now, like I said, the clear isn't all that amazing, but the single target is really good. For an attack skill, we use Frenzy to generate our Frenzy charges, and we support it with Power Charge on crit, so we gain Power Charges as well. Now, with a few unique items that we use, we not only gain attack speed and damage from our Frenzies, but we also gain damage over time multiplier from our Frenzies. So that's pretty much how it plays. On single target, you just throw down your Wither Totems, and you just blast them, stack a few stacks on the enemy, and then run around until they die. It's really straightforward, really simple. You don't have to do a lot, right? You just right-click and run around. So I think let's take a look at the passive tree first. So for the passive tree, it's just your generic poison-based spell build. We grab poison damage, physical damage, crit chance, a little bit of crit multi, life, and then we also grab the combo of Acro and Phase Acro combined with Wind Dancer. Now these 3 keystones right here, they make any build just very, very tanky. So I like to start off down here with the attack speed nodes. Attack speed just makes the Spellslinger playstyle feel a little bit smoother to play, but ideally you'd want to go for the chaos and physical nodes up here. Then we take this cluster, giving us some attack speed, life, damage, crit chance and crit multi, physical damage and crit chance and damage over time. These nodes are just, they're like 1 passive point nodes to take, so they're really good to take as well. I then move up to grab some life. I then have the spell poison node right here. This is a really good node for any like poison based spell build. Then some chaos damage over time. Here I take a power charge. Since we use a badge of the Brotherhood, we do stack some power charges because it gives us more frenzies as well. And since this is a perfect agony build, we really want to apply our poisons with critical strikes, right? And then I anoint the second power charge over here. Then for the rest of the build, it's just life wherever we can grab it. All the good poison nodes we want to take as well. I take this jewel socket right here, some life over here, this poison node right here. And since we do need to travel down for Wind Dancer, you might as well take these life nodes down here as well. Then I take these nodes for reduced mana reservation. That's just because I also fit in an aspect of the spider. If you don't plan on doing that, these nodes aren't as necessary. I don't think you need to take all of them to reserve your auras. Then I use a Glorious Vanity with Corrupted Soul. Now this gives us a percentage of our life as extra energy shield, and usually this can be a little bit difficult to sustain in most builds because then you need a way to recover life and energy shield. But since we're using, since we're gaining life on hit and energy shield on hit from our spells, this works out really, really well with this build. And we're able to sustain both really efficiently. So for cluster jewels, I use two small life clusters with Sublime Sensation, and this is just since we're stacking both life and energy shield, we pretty much benefit from both of these. So that's why I use 2 of them in this setup. For the medium, I'm currently just using a damage over time medium, but ideally you'd want a chaos damage over time medium. The notables are what matter, not the base, really. So I wanna have another one down here as well in a few levels. The one notable that we want on our mediums is Wasting Affliction. This just lets our poison stacks deal their damage faster. For the other notable on the mediums, it's not that important. You could take any of the poison notables, any of the crit notables, any of the damage over time notables for chaos damage. I just have exposure therapy here because I could buy this one for like 10C. It was really cheap to buy. But yeah, let's jump into Craft of Exile and we'll go through all the possible notables you could have. And we'll talk about which ones are pretty okay to have here. So over on Craft of Exile, if we take a look at medium cluster jewels for chaos damage over time, you can see that they can roll quite a few notables. And in all honesty, any of these chaos damage over time notables will help out with DPS, will boost DPS. But ideally, as long as you have Wasting Affliction on the one notable of your medium, any of these with the poison tag or the critical strike tag should work really, really well. So Hemorrhage, Low Tolerance, Septic Spells, and Steady Torment would be the best ones to go for, but I don't have those. Any of these would work just as well. Now, if we take a look at our large cluster, this is a Chaos Damage 8 passive large cluster. And the two nodes that you definitely want, you can't go without these, or you can go without these, but these two are a massive DPS boost. The first one being Grim Oath, gaining 10% of our physical damage as extra Chaos damage, and then Overwhelming Malice for Unholy Might, giving us 30% of our physical damage as extra Chaos damage. Now, poison stacks are applied by physical damage and Chaos damage. So gaining a percentage of our physical damage as Chaos damage is a massive DPS boost for poison builds. And since Bladefall and Blade Blast both do physical damage, scaling physical damage throughout our tree means that we gain quite a bit of extra Chaos damage. Now, if we take a look at Craft of Exile, so if we take a look at the notables that can roll on a large Chaos damage cluster, you can see that any of these should be okay as long as you have Grim Oath and Overwhelming Malice already, but the ideal one that you want to aim for is Touch of Cruelty, making enemies take increased Chaos damage. Now, getting all three of these on one cluster jewel is really difficult, so just having Overwhelming Malice and Grim Oath should be just fine. But if you do want to min-max and you do want to push for that GG build, I think the best one you want to go for is Touch of Cruelty as a third passive. Okay, so let's talk about the Ascendancy next. The first and probably the best node that you can take for a build like this, Noxious Strike. Not only does it give us poison damage multi and chance to poison on hit, the main stat that we want right here is the 5% increased poison duration per poison we've inflicted recently. Like I've mentioned previously, we apply hundreds of poisons really quickly, and so each poison you apply increases the duration of the following poison stacks. And poison stacks, the longer they last, the more damage they do. Or the longer they have to do damage. And if you build them up, the more DPS you have. So this is an amazing node to take right here. Then after this one, we take Toxic Delivery. This just gives us more damage if we apply poisons through critical strikes. Since we're stacking power charges, since we are an assassin, and since this Ascendancy right here gives us critical strike chance per poison as well, this means that we pretty much always deal 50% more damage with poison, which is a massive DPS boost right here. Then next I go for Opportunistic. This gives us more single target damage and makes us a lot more tanky in the big Maven fights. You could go for Unstable Infusion, and for a long time I did have Unstable Infusion, which gives us +1 max power charges, giving us another Frenzy charge. But ideally I think Opportunistic is the better option here. If you have something like Elusive on crit boots, maybe you could swap out Mistwalker for Unstable Infusion. But ideally in this sort of setup, I just go for Opportunistic. And then like I said, as our last Ascendancy, we go for Mistwalker because Elusive is just too good to not have. And it synergizes really well with the Badge of the Brotherhood. Okay, so let's talk about the items that I use. And this is where things get very flexible. I'm going to tell you why I use certain items and then what good alternatives there are. So you don't have to do this exact setup. This is more of a general Bladefall, Blade Blast, Spellslinger, Chaos sort of setup. So first off, we start with a Poet's Pen. Now this is just to trigger our Bladefall without having to reserve mana with Spellslinger. Good alternatives here are the Obliteration one, if you're okay with like reserving Bladefall as a mana, but then mana management could be a little bit difficult. So Poet's Pen is like the most mandatory item here, and even that isn't mandatory. Then we have Crown of the Eyes as our unique headpiece. It's just a really solid all-round unique, and it's easy to find one with +1 max power charges, which then through the badge gives us another frenzy charge as well. Alternatives here, you could go for just a good rare with life and resistances, or you could go for a Maw of Conquest unique helmets. Maw isn't a bad option if you want to go for the self-poison route, so that's something to consider. And then for our shield, we have the Perpetua. This is just because it gives us a nice amount of attack speed, movement speed, it scales our energy shield quite well. I was lucky enough to get a cold res implicit, and it also gives us 1000 like lightning damage Aegis shield. That's the reason we have this bubble around us. So that's the only reason I have this shield. If you want to go for self-poison, you could go for an Apep Supremacy. That will work really well. I've seen people use a replica Mistwall, the replica version, not this one. So that's also something that I know works pretty well here. But even a rare with just life and resistances would work quite well here. Then the amulets, like I said, we use Badge of the Brotherhood. This just synergizes really well with the fact that we're stacking power charges. And it also gives us elusive buff effect, which is really nice on Assassin. An alternative here would just be a good rare amulet with +1 to all fizz spells and chaos damage over time multiplier. Or you could even go for an Owl's Uprising with Malevolence reserves no mana. Then you have a lot of mana to play around with. For our boots, we use the Spider Beast Boss unique boots. And the main reason we use these is for the 20 ES gained on hits. And this is massive. Like I've said, in ultimatums you have so many enemies around you, you hit so many enemies. This amounts to a crazy amount of sustain. But unfortunately, if we want to use these, we need to fit in Aspect of the Spider. And with all the reservation on our tree, we don't have enough mana left without using a Sakowal's Nest. And that's the only reason I use this unique chest piece, just because it gives us reduced mana reservation. Good alternatives here would be a Kintsugi for a little bit more of a defensive sort of playstyle, although this is quite defensive thanks to the ES on hits. You could go for a Carcass Jack for more AoE. If you want to just purely focus on damage, you could go for a Dendrobate. A rare with life as extra ES would work really nice here as well. But yeah, like I said, this isn't necessary, it's just for mana reservation. That's the only reason I bought this piece. Then for our gloves, we have Snake Bites. Now, Snake Bites synergize really well with the fact that we're stacking so many power charges, right? Not only does it give us even more attack speed per frenzy, it also gives us damage over time multiplier per frenzy. So that's the main reason we have this Badge of the Brotherhood combo, power charge stacking, Snake Bite sort of combo. And getting these with Despair on hit is really nice as well. So these are really solid. They're pretty difficult to beat for this sort of chaos poison damage Spellslinger setup. So these are really nice to have. I do recommend you use these. Then for our rings, we just have a lot of resistances, and the non-channeling skills have reduced mana cost craft. Now, ideally, you'd want both of these rings to be rings with the Shaper mod, life gain on hit, life gain for each enemy hit by your spells, right? So that's a lot of sustain. We're already gaining a bunch of ES on hit, now we gain life on hit as well. So ideally, you'd want both of these rings to give you life on hit for your spells, but that can be a little bit expensive to get, so I just have one of these giving me life on hit by my spells. The rest is just like resistances, right? Since we're using so many rares, or so many uniques, it's pretty difficult to fit in all of our resistances and be res capped. So our rings and our belt are really the main place we get resistances, and on one of our rings we do want to craft Aspect of the Spider. Since we don't really have too many rare options to get that on, the ring is the best slot. Belt also wouldn't be bad to get it on. And then, like I said, for the belt, it's just rares with resistances, right? And a lot of life. Now, if you change up items right here and you don't need a rare belt, you could go for a Viscose Leash for a little bit of more movement speed. And you could go for a Headhunter if you want to, but Headhunters typically don't benefit all that much, or poison builds don't benefit all that much from Headhunters. So Headhunter is not something I would recommend in a setup like this. And then I also just want to mention for boot alternatives, if you don't want to go for Aspect of the Spider and Energy Shield on hits, you could go for a Replica Inyas giving you move speed per power charge, or even Dark Rays giving you move speed per frenzy. But the combo of ES on hits and Aspect of the Spider is really powerful. If you haven't tried Aspect of the Spider in these ultimatum encounters, it's really strong because it reduces the action speed of enemies around you, it makes them take more damage, and then with these boots you gain ES on hit. So I really think Aspect of the Spider is pretty damn underrated, specifically for Ultimatum League. So for the flasks, we have our instant life flask. Ideally, you'd want an instant life flask with bleed removal. I just haven't made this one yet. Then our next flask is a Corralito's signature, not only making our critical strike chance lucky, but it also increases the duration of poisons applied during flask effect. Now it also grants us perfect agony, which doesn't matter since we've already spec'd it right here, right? And technically we could unspec perfect agony right here, but in longer boss fights like Cyrus or Shaper, sometimes you don't have this flask up, and you kind of don't want to lose this notable right here, or this keystone. So that's why we have perfect agony on the tree as well as on the Corralitos. Then we have an Atziri's Promise. This is just physical damage as extra chaos damage and a little bit of chaos resistance. Like I've explained, having physical as extra chaos does increase our poison damage by quite a bit. Then for your last 2 slots, I just have 2 rares. These are pretty flexible. You could do here whatever you want. I just have a Quicksilver Flask for more movement speed and freeze and chill removal and immunity. This helps out a little bit in Ultimatum so you don't get frozen. And then I have a Quartz Flask for dodge, both attacks and spell dodge, and it also grants phasing, which is also really, really nice in Ultimatums. And this one just has curse removal. Like I said, these last 2 slots are very flexible. You can do whatever you want with these, but I do recommend you go for move speed and dodge. Then in the Stygian, I just have a jewel that gives me a little bit of resistances, life, and also some strength. Since I want to run a very high level steel skin, I just need strength from wherever I can get it. That's what I have over here. And then in the tree, this jewel socket that I have over here, this is just a jewel that gives me a little bit of life and resistance, and it has the cannot be hindered implicit for ultimatums. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the tree and the gear. I don't even have the Malevolence Watcher's Eye. That's something that I would want to get still. It's a future upgrade. I don't have it. So let's take a look at the skill gems that we use in this setup. Like I said, Bladefall, Blade Blast. So we start off with our Bladefall. Bladefall linked to Spell Cascade, allowing us to have more blades to detonate, linked to a concentrated effect, because we want the blades on the ground to fall as close to each other as possible. That way Blade Blast can have overlapping explosions, dealing more single target damage. In our helmet, we have a pretty high level cost per damage taken, linked to a level 9 Immortal Call. The main reason for this is, since we have life in ES on hit, we take hits and we sustain small hits quite easily. I want this to proc on bigger hits. That's why I have this higher than usual level Immortal Call in the setup. Then I also have Steel Skin with increased duration on my left click. Now I know that Steel Skin and Immortal Call cancel each other out, but since Steel Skin does have some downtime, I kind of feel that it's still worth using both of them in a setup like this. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. You could go for a Golem right here, or even something like a Cost on Death Portal if you feel like that's necessary. In our shield, we have our trigger attack, Frenzy, and faster attacks, and Power Charge and Crit. Frenzy to generate Frenzy charges, and then Power Charge and Crit to generate Power charges, and faster attacks just so, I mean, the faster we cast, the faster we can move, and the less we have to stand still to actually deal damage. Then in our boots, we have Spell Totem Support, linked to multiple Totem Support, linked to Wither. We also have Plague Bearer linked in here, but Plague Bearer doesn't have to be linked. This is pretty much just the 3 links, so we can have our Wither Totems to help out in single target fights. And I say help out, but these Wither Totems are a massive DPS boost, so do use them in single target encounters. Then in our gloves, we have a level 3 Enlighten linked to a Malevolence. Now those are the only 2 gems that need to be linked here. In the rest of the setup, I have a Flame Dash and I also have a Portal. These are just linked because the gloves are corrupted, and it's quite a pain to change the links of a corrupted item, so I just kept it as is. It doesn't affect anything, but the main takeaway here is you only need the Enlighten linked to the Malevolence. Then in our 6th link, we have a level 20 quality Blade Blast. You want to push the level of Blade Blast as high as possible. Thus far, I've only had a level 20, and it's been performing fine. It's done everything. It's killed Uber Elder, it's done the big Maven fights. So the higher level of your Blade Blast, the more DPS you can get. Then I have a Divergent Spellslinger, just for a little bit of extra trigger rate. But for the longest time, I was just using a normal Spellslinger. It works just as good. Then I have a Vile Toxin support, linked to a Deadly Ailment support, linked to an Unbound Ailment support, linked to a Void Manipulation support. And I think the big takeaway here is that, as you've seen, none of these gems are 21, none of these gems are awakened. And I was still able to do everything quite easily, especially the Breach Boss Maven fight went really, really easy. I haven't done it this early into a league on another build, and it's been really, really easy. So I think if you use Awaken Gems, you could squeeze out a few more million DPS from this specific setup. So for Pantheons, and they're not upgraded, the meme continues. I have Soul of Brine King. Now the main reason I have this is because of the helps so that you don't get stun locked, right? In ultimatums, you have a lot of enemies around you and you don't want to get stunned, especially on this build. With all the life and ES we gain on hits and all of our dodge chance and aspect of the spider, we rarely die to a single hit. Like, a lot of enemies need to stun lock us and hit us all at once for us to be killed. If that's not the case and you're able to just move around in the ultimatum, it's really easy to survive up until wave 20 pretty much every single time, unless if you've chosen like the worst, most deadly mods there are, but that doesn't happen all that often. So the main reason we have Brine King is so we don't get stunned, and then we also have Relikish. I've switched over from Shikari really recently to Relikish, that's why it's not upgraded, but the main reason to take Relikish is for the maim avoidance, right? Once again, we don't want to be slowed down, we don't want to get stun locked in ultimatums. With this build, as long as you're moving, as long as you're able to attack, as long as you have blades falling and blasting, you'll survive up until wave 10 pretty much every single time. And that's pretty much all you need to know to replicate a build like this. It's one of those builds that I can really recommend. It's a decent boss killer. I used it to do all the big Maven fights and unlock all my Atlas passives. And since it's still pretty early on into a league, it didn't require too much currency to get up and running. This is one of those builds that I think could be a really good league starter. And specifically in Ultimatum League, it works really well with the league mechanic. With all the life and ES on hits, you rarely die in the big ultimatum fights, which was one of the most frustrating things for me personally. I can actually do ultimatums now, so I'm really happy with the build purely just for that reason, but it also has good single target, it's a pretty zoomy mapper, and the playstyle is quite fun. If you have any questions or you're curious about any tiny detail, the best place to ask me is in the comment section down below or when I'm live over at Twitch, link in the description. This is one of those really powerful, just good old faithful builds that gets things done. I really enjoyed playing it, and I hope if you do decide to play it that you enjoy it as well. But that's it from me. My name is Sniz, and I hope I'll see you in the next one. Have a good day. Bye. Well, this is awkward. This was supposed to be a stream clip motivating you to go and watch a stream. But I managed to delete all my stream recordings. I don't know why I did that. I don't know. So this is what you get. This was supposed to be interesting stream clips. But we have fun there. You're just gonna have to take my word for it. We have fun. So if you wanna have fun, go follow the stream. Oh, that's 20 seconds? Oh, that's okay. I'll see you next time. Bye.